I graduated in December. I took an extra semester. I was trying to keep my grades up because I was going to go to law school, and that was a lost cause. But so I ended up, I was very lucky. I got 2 summer jobs with Champlin Petroleum Company in Houston, Texas, later bought by UPRC, the railroad. And I had worked 2 summers. My dad knew somebody, and we didn't even call it internships. It was just a summer job. And I worked with the land department, and I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted to do. I'm a people person, and I hope a commercial type of guy. And I was in love with it. They offered a full-time job. And then if you remember, so in 1982, I believe it was July of 82, that Penn Square went under and price of oil collapsed. And it was about to start a real bad time for about a decade. And luckily for me, they honored my commitment. And I started off and I came to work in Houston, Texas. I left the day after graduation. I didn't go to the ceremony. I went to work. And it was in Houston, Texas. And I really enjoyed it. They put me in these records, and they had major layoffs for the first 5 years while I was there. And I was fortunate enough to not get caught up in it until about 3 years. And I was one of the last people to go. And I think the reason was I was making so little money. And
that's one way to
working for 2.
One way to survive a layoff is, that's how you survive a layoff, is to be cheap.
Exactly. And, but I enjoyed all aspects of it. I really loved the land business. It was suited for me. But it was dead, as you know. And so in 1987, I got laid off. They kind of put me in division orders for a bit, and then it was just darn near a shutdown before they got bought. And wonderful experience. And my wife, it's really funny how my wife comes back into it again on my career. She was, I think, the first female gas buyer for a company called Midcon, and they owned Panhandle Eastern and Trunkline and a bunch of those pipelines. And she goes, Mike, you need to get in the gas business. It's just like land, but in natural gas, and it's all deregulating, and I think you would love it. And so I ended up getting in, did some gas contract work, and then I got an offer from a company called Florida Gas, and I took it, and I was a gas supply rep. And what I learned at that point for me, again, it was the skills that were transferable. And I took to it. Natural gas became my buddy, and I did really well on the pipeline side and loved every single day going to work. And it really was like land. And so in a funny way, in fact, let me show you something. I've got something up that I think you might be able to see some. Can you look at this back wall at all? Let me move this.
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you see that?
Oh, these are the business cards.
These are, I'm really making a mess of this. Hold on. This is great to be on camera. But if you look at that, those are all the business cards I've ever had in my life.
We've talked about that.
My wife gave me this as a Christmas present when I took this new job. It was so cool. But what I wanted to point out, even though it's not very clear, obviously, if you look at that bottom job right there, that was my land job. So there's 20 business cards on this frame, and one is land. And if you looked at what actually was going on, I was building commercial skills and learning, but it was what I learned at OU. And so I took to it, started, and I ended up having, there's 20 business cards on there. I did not have 20 jobs. Sometimes they were lateral moves, and I was kind of a change agent build-up guy at Enron. So I worked there for 13 years, and I actually had a seat at the table. I was CEO Enron Global Markets at the bankruptcy, and it's still sometimes hard for me to talk about. I actually, if you guys went to the AAPL annual meeting in California, I actually did a speech, and it was called Ethics, Enron, and Educating Tomorrow's Leaders. And it was a lot about culture and all of that. But what that silly thing back there is, and I take kids through that, is that we're teaching you how to be commercial folks. I mean, we are land. we are oil and gas. And I'm an and kind of guy. I'm not a but kind of guy. And the and to me is we're oil and gas and we are land and we're other commercial jobs in energy. And so that's been a lot. The land jobs have been difficult for entry level. You really said it well, Brent, when you talk about bright people, big resumes. It's tough to go against a 3-year landman looking at an opportunity for a kid that's got 2 semesters and a new graduate. And so what I've needed to do, and I've called it, I'm a big commercial guy, and acquisitions, you always have project names. But I went into something that I call E-cubed, and it's energy management, employment expansion. And in the last couple of years, I've had well over 200 different companies I've met with going through what these kids can do and what OU teaches them and why they can fit in a midstream company. So how do they fit in a bank? Downstream. Finance companies. We have graduates that are double majors that went to go work for Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and they frankly didn't know who we were. And I had to kind of educate them on that. And it's especially true with the electricity companies and renewable companies. In fact, I'm probably the enemy because I'm a natural gas guy. But by talking to these companies and letting them know what skills we're putting out and how transferable it really is, and sometimes listing out the jobs they could do. I've been able to get some 5 different midstream companies hiring kids to be in gas control, gas scheduling, business development, and kind of learn that business. Yeah. And so it's been an interesting experience to take what I just said about being successful and not losing our roots. I am land first and foremost. I am a landman graduate. My son is, and now we're adding. In fact, one of the things that drives me crazy in today's world is all the talk about the energy transition. And we all know, I just like to reframe it. I kind of challenge the premise, and I call it the great energy expansion, and instead of a transition, because one of the things, so I've let this department and this major get smaller every single year. And the reason is we didn't have jobs for them. And when I took this job, one of the few requirements that I really talked about as something firm is I wanted total transparency with what we were seeing in the major. And if that means a smaller major, it means a smaller major. I really wanted to teach the intro class, which was not unusual. Steve Long did that same thing, and I kept the same format. And I really wanted to educate these kids on being able to change and make sure they understood where they fit in. And, it's been an interesting experience, especially with minus $38 oil. That just really helped, new graduates coming out.
Yeah, that'll help.
And fortunately, these new sectors have really been helpful.